Good morning. Architecture 322, Lecture 13. Pierre Koenig, a view from the archive. It's nice to see you this morning. 8 students, welcome. 2 students, I'm told, are not here. They're on some university business, but I didn't know about that. And 11 students, is that right? 11 students haven't bothered to turn up. If you're one of those 11, I think you should be here. I find your lack of attendance not impressive. Okay, so this course, this module 322, is meant to reflect recent research. We are a research active university. Many of the staff have what's called a teaching and research contract. We are expected to do research. Research involves investigation. We're meant to publish the results of our investigations, and our research is meant to inform our teaching. So this module, as I've been teaching it, is very much to do with what research I've been doing, and Nicholas Ray has been doing, and Neil Chassor has been doing. Yet, since it falls to me to carry the greater load, give the majority of the lectures, then you are, for better or for worse, subjected to my research interests. And it did occur to me that perhaps you're getting slightly tired of steel houses with flat roofs and big sliding glass doors. If so, go and have a look at something else. But at least you have the opportunity and possibly the privilege of looking at a particular aspect of architecture in considerable detail from, if I might say it, somebody who knows more about it than anybody else, at least in this country, if not in America. And in this last lecture, which is a preparation in many ways for the seminar group that I'm running, we're going to be looking at the work of Pierre Koenig. Oh, not again, but yes, we're going to look at Pierre Koenig again, but now actually look at his archive. An archive is a collection. It's the source material for research. And what I'm trying to show you is not so much his architecture, because we've seen that. I'm showing you the variety of material that is in an archive. Those of you working on my seminar topic will be using much of this material. I want you to be aware of what an archive is. It's everything that goes on behind the scenes in a museum or even a library. And it's endlessly fascinating, if you like that sort of thing, but it's also very varied in its content. Any research story is a personal story, the story of one person's research effort. And my research for this has been largely based in recent years, at least since 2013, on the Getty Center in Los Angeles, California, or at the Getty Center, I should say. The Getty Center is a very, very large and extremely well endowed research complex on top of a hill overlooking Los Angeles. If you've heard about the fires in Los Angeles of recent weeks, they were burning all the way around this building, and maybe it doesn't look quite as white as it does in these pictures. It comprises 3 principal elements. One is the Getty Conservation Institute. The Getty Research Institute and the museum building. So there are 3 separate parts to this campus. Actually, there's a 4th, which is the administration building. And what you're looking at here in the 2 color photographs are is the Getty Conservation Institute in the top one on the right, and the administration building off in the distance. And then in the bottom picture, you're looking across from the Getty Research Institute to the museum building, which comprises a number of different elements. This whole facility is open to the public. You can arrive by car, put your car in a multi-story underground car park, and then take a funicular railway, a train that is, up the hill to Getty Centre. And if you're a member of the public, you can go to the museum and the museum shop and the restaurants and so on. And if you're a member of the staff or working there and you have a badge, that will give you access to whichever part of the facility you're allowed to go to. It is highly controlled, and this, as much as anything, is due to the huge wealth that is stored there. A great deal of very fine, very expensive art is kept there. And I went there in 2013 to work at the Getty Conservation Institute. That's the thing you see here in the bottom picture, indeed in both pictures. And you get some idea from these photographs of how the whole complex of buildings sit in the landscape, in the hills above Los Angeles. The building was designed by Richard Meyer, M-E-I-E-R, a very good architect of whom very little is said at the moment. You've probably never heard of him. Anyway, I went there for 3 months. I stayed in the scholar's residence. I'm not going to show you a picture of that, but it's a rather endearing pink building with a U-shaped plan that is set around a swimming pool, and there are lots of other scholars living there in apartments, and it was great fun. And I would come up the hill, not on the funicular railway, but by the Getty bus, which picked us up every morning, and I'd work either in this building here that you see in the bottom picture, somewhere in the bowels of it, or I would work in the special collection room of the Getty Research Institute. I didn't know what I was doing for the first 6 weeks out of 12. I thought I was going to do something, and the moment I got there, I found out that somebody else was doing something very similar. So I kicked around for a while, and then eventually somebody said to me, well, it doesn't matter what you do, just sort of make use of your time here. And this came as a bit of a revelation, because I thought I had to do what I'd said in my application. So I started looking at Pierre Koenig. I started looking at his archive, and one particular building in detail, which was Case Study House 21, the Bailey House. You know the house, you're going to see it again. And as a result of that, I published an article in the Getty Research Journal, and you can see the print off here, which is from the internet. You can see these things online, but you have to go to Chicago journals to find the Getty Research Journal. So this was a 5,000 word essay investigating the restoration of the Case Study House 21. It was restored in the 1990s. It cost more to restore than it cost to build. And this had a degree of success. I happened to get this email from somebody. This is the Getty Research Journal, number 9. I think my essay was in number 7. And you might notice there, most read of all the published articles, the following were the most read within the past 12 months. And I thought, well, that's rather nice. But I hesitate to say there was anything to do with me. It was to do with the house. It was to do with the subject matter. It was to do with Pierre Koenig. And while I was there, having coffee out on the terraces, enjoying the California sunlight, I had a conversation with somebody from the Getty Research Institute, one of the directors, who said, well, why don't you put in a book proposal, and we'll see if we can do a book on Pierre Koenig. So I put in my book proposal, and they accepted it, and this is what came out, a view from the archive. So that was 2014 when that contract came through. But I didn't have the research material. I had to go and do something. I had to go and spend time there doing the research. They had given me a contract which paid me $15,000, not all at once, but in 3 stages. $7,500 on the signing of the contract, $3.5 or $3 or so, $3,000 on the submission of the manuscript, and another $3,000 on publication. And with that money, I could go back and forth to Los Angeles during 2015, 16, 17. I did this for 3 years. During spring break in September, before teaching started, I'd go back and I'd work in the archive, in the Getty Research Institute special collection, which was on the right-hand side of the photograph behind that glass wall. And I go there every day from 9 o'clock when they opened to 5 o'clock when they closed. And it would get colder and colder and colder because the air conditioning would kick in. So up to about 12 o'clock it was quite pleasant, and then by 3 o'clock you had to put on a sweater and a jacket. They even had Parker big insulated jackets hanging there for the staff to wear, who had to sit at the desks and supervise all the researchers. And to do the research, one had to book in, you had to make a reservation, but because I was coming from England, because I was working on a Getty project, because the Getty were investing in me, I had carte blanche. I got privilege. I could go in any time that they were open. And then you had to order the material you wanted to see, and you'd fill out requisition slips of paper. Actually, you did it online. Sorry, you didn't do it on paper anymore. When the material arrived back from the depths of the building, red filing boxes, or what they called flat files, the size of 2 of these tables put together, big cardboard files, you'd open like that, folders you'd open like that. I would then see a requisition slip attached to that. But it was an extraordinary place to work. There were people there of world-class research standards. You were in there, I was in there with the best of the people. But there were also young people, there were students, there were people working on scholarships at the Getty Research Institute. So it was a really rather wonderful opportunity. Then there was a huge library, of course, which you can see in this photograph, a bit of the library. And, well, what can I say? It was very enjoyable, and it was very rewarding. I don't know how many weeks I spent there. I should think over 3 years, I probably spent 20 weeks or something like that. And then the book got published in March of this year. The thing people think about when they think about Pierre Koenig is the case study houses, 21 and 22. And that's probably why that article I published was so popular, was read so much. These case study houses, and particularly this photograph, which we'll come back to later, these are very, very significant in the history of modern architecture in California. And this is probably the best known image of any case study house. But I want you to look at this carefully. We've discussed it before. I think I've pointed out to you, at least I'm sure I've pointed out to you, how the street lighting runs right across the body of the 2 women sitting there. How this whole image is a construction, how the building was incomplete and full of building dust, how the furniture was specially brought in for the photo shoot, how the plants in the foreground were held in place by clamps that you, of course, couldn't see, and how the photograph was comprised of 2 shots, as it were. One was a 7-minute exposure and the other was a flashbulb shot on the same negative. But I think the question I want to ask, and I want you to consider, is how much the architecture is a result of the photograph in terms of its fame, its popular appeal, how people respond to it. Is it just this photograph? Is this what the architecture is about? Is it because of these two women, young, fresh, in white, the city reaching out behind, suggesting broad horizons? This is 1960. The future is just beginning. A new president, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, young, handsome. They referred to his presidency, his how can I put it? The White House, what went on there, it was referred to as Camelot. Does this photograph somehow suggest that that hope for the new decade? Maybe it does. So what would happen if you didn't have those two women there? If you had one man? Does that change it? A fellow looking out at the view, not addressing the camera, sultry, thoughtful maybe, apprehensive. I don't know. It's a different photograph. Nothing's changed around the picture, it's just a different person. And it's also here in black and white. Is black and white important? Is it because it's black and white that all the distractions of colour are removed? That the city lights and the reflection on the underside of the roof and the furniture and the white jacket, all these are equally toned. There's a sense of balance, there's a sense of integrity, there's a sense of compositional unity because it's black and white. If it's not in black and white, what happens? Is that the same picture? Is that the same thing? Is that the same idea? There's an orange cushion on the sofa. There's a blue cushion on the chair. There's a red cushion in the chaise longue at the bottom of the picture. Are these points of colour distracting? The horizon is no longer dark black, it's sort of bluish. There's light pollution. Is this the same thing? So you see, it's not just a question of talking about the architecture, it's a question of talking about how the architecture is perceived, how we respond to it. What happens if we take all that stuff out? That furniture that was borrowed for the occasion, the plants that were held in place by clamps, the coloured cushions, the man in the white jacket or the girls in the white dresses. Take all that away. And what do we have? Something that is slightly disordered, something that's a bit naked, something that doesn't look particularly interesting. So, there's a question to ponder. When you're writing your essay, don't write the obvious. Try to get under the surface of whatever it is you're writing about and question what you're seeing. Bear in mind that, at least in my seminar group, I've got to read 11 essays. Nick Ray's got to read 10. By the time you get to essay 5, and they're saying the same thing as each other, one's interest starts to flag. It gets tedious, it gets boring. Say something different. And also, remember that you're not the only people writing essays. There's, in my total group of essays, all of which are on the same broad topic, I've got 36 in Liverpool. So with your lot, I've got to read 47 essays. And I can tell you that after a few days of this, I want to reach for a gun because, frankly, it's mind-numbing. Try to do something that's different, that will make me sit up, that will make Nick Ray, who will be reading 47 essays, that will make him sit up. You've got to look after yourselves when you are writing essays, because you ultimately are the one who will get the mark. As we go through this presentation today, I'm going to show you a whole range of material that comes from the archive, because, as I said earlier, I want you to start to understand the depth of an archival collection. It might spur some interest in yourselves to go and look at one. So here's a drawing that you probably haven't seen before. Some of the drawings I'm showing you are unfinished, some are final copies, some are rather grubby prints. It all depends on what is there. This is Case Study House 22, as you can see, and it's a view constructed to show off the architecture, in particular the structure. The beams reach out. It's a view that you cannot get with a camera, because unless you're suspended on the end of a crane in space, you can't get this far away. And this one is even more difficult to get. But you can show it with a drawing. So what's the architect trying to show with this drawing? Is he trying to show how comfortable the sofa is? How warm the fire is? Or is he making some statement about the power of the structure, how the building is supported, it appears, largely on 2 steel beams and 2 concrete beams, and how these reach out in an almost enhanced perspective into space, to a place where the viewer is literally suspended. The ground falls off steeply here. You can't get a picture from here, it's impossible. So, what is the drawing trying to do? What is the drawing trying to say? What is it trying to sell? There's a plan. The previous illustration was taken from the very bottom of the plan, down there, looking that way. This is a plan which doesn't show anything about the structure, doesn't really show anything about the materiality of the building. It's a plan that is largely to do with the allocation of space. Children's room, master bedroom, MBR, dressing room, dining, kitchen, living room. It's to do with how the building is set out. It could be a drawing for publication. It is neat, it doesn't look worked over. There's an amount of graphic articulation. The pool has got a bit of shading in the corner here, here and here. The plants are put in. The car is indicated as a triangle in the parking space. So what's the difference between this plan and another one? What is this plan drawn on? It seems to be white paper, or it's a print on white paper. Other plans might be drawn on tracing paper, yellow tracing paper, which you can correct and add to, from which you can take prints. So this is, I suspect, a print, and therefore it's not a working drawing. It's not a drawing that is going to be changed. It might be used for writing over, but as we see it here, it's clearly a finished drawing of one particular sort. So what is that sort? The kitchen is in the center, almost the center of the long wing that comes down the page. This is the kitchen. It has a lower ceiling, it has 2 counters, it's a space within a space, and in a sense that's necessary because the whole of the volume is contained within glass walls. So we have a perspective drawing of it. Why would the architect draw the perspective of this? Maybe because he wants to show the space within the space. Look at the use of tone, look at the use of line. What do you understand about the materials? The wooden veneer on the surfaces of the kitchen, the carpet perhaps on the floor, the black and white tiles. One also picks up on the transparency of the building because you can see the hills off to the right. So it's a drawing which has a particular function, a particular role to play, particularly in relation to a plan as, how can I put it, undeveloped as the plan which I've just shown you. There's other documentation in the archive. There's photographs of the building under construction. I had a camera, one was allowed a camera, and I photographed everything I saw. Stuff that was of interest, stuff that wasn't interesting, because I didn't know whether that bit of paper or that letter actually was part of a bigger story. Things I missed out, I often had to go back and look at again. So sometimes these photographs look a bit grubby because I'm just holding my camera above the desk and photographing. Many of the drawings were in sheets of acetate, clear plastic, to preserve them. You weren't allowed to take the drawings out. And the ceiling lights reflected off the plastic. So the only thing to do was to stand about 2 meters back from the drawing and photograph at a funny angle. Therefore you got a very distorted image. And put that in Photoshop, you had to somehow straighten it up. And only doing it that way could you avoid getting all the glare and reflection of the ceiling lights. The ceiling lights were really badly designed in that space. Here are two photographs which show the building under construction. And this letter, which I think is really interesting, April the 19th, 1960, Dear Bob, I'm leaving for San Francisco Wednesday AM, and because I have been unable to reach you, I must leave this note. It seems angry. It's block caps, uppercase. Yet Pierre always typed in uppercase. When I went to the job, I was shocked to see no one there and many things to be done yet. As you know, we were supposed to shoot Monday, take photographs. The deadline has been changed once, but it is impossible to change it again. The die is set. Mr. Van Keppel is waiting to move furniture in. Schulman, the photographer, comes by the job every day to see when he can shoot. Mr. Intenza, the publisher, is shouting for photographs so he can print the next issue. The president of Bethlehem, Steele, who provided the steel for the building, the president of Bethlehem is supposed to visit the finished house this Friday. There is to be a press conference this weekend, not to mention Mr. Stahl, the client. This will give you some idea of the pressure being put on. I hope that you can act in accordance. Also, we have to treat the floors before anything can be placed on them. As I will be gone, I would appreciate it if you can make the arrangements with Mr. Forster at Wotco Dennis, telephone GR 92969, to get this done right away. Also, call Mr. Van Keppel at X 31839 and tell him when he may furnish. Many thanks, Pierre Koenig. This is a letter from an architect to a building contractor, or maybe site manager, saying, pull out your finger. Now, would one have known that this project was struggling? I don't think so, until one found this letter. One would see it as a perfect object perched on a hillside. But the letter tells us a lot about it, and it informs that photograph that we saw taken by Julius Schulman, which was a photograph constructed, taken in a building that was unfinished, where the floor probably hadn't been finished at all, judging from the letter, because there wouldn't have been building dust there if the floor was ready. So, you learn things from the archives. But that house, Pierre Koenig did not think was his best building. He thinks it was this one, the previous case study house, done a couple of years before. In fact, by the time he finished case study house 22 in 1960, he was exhausted. This house here had a logical process to it. It was designed as a kit of parts. The other one was a one-off, not as a kit of parts, a custom building with a demanding client who didn't pay the full fee because he said the building was late. So you bust your gut as an architect, and then the client says, well, you're a month late, I'm not going to pay you. It's not a fair world. Case study house 21, the Bailey House. This is how we know it, 1958. Another of these really, I think, very good perspective drawings. He was a great draftsman. But this is not the house that was first designed. That's the house that was first designed, 1956, the Bailey House. The strange thing is that Pierre Koenig actually had forgotten this design. Late in life, he was surprised when somebody turned up, found the drawings. He never told me about it. None of it was ever published. I found a drawing and I couldn't work out what this was for. It was a plan that looked like the Bailey House, but it wasn't quite right. I'd found a plan of the earlier building. Anyway, more research and I found other drawings and it became clear what this was. By then Pierre had died. I couldn't go and ask him, and then somebody gave me some recorded interviews done about a year or two before he died. He died in 2004, and in the recorded interviews he admitted to having done this earlier building, which he'd completely forgotten about, designed this earlier building. So here we are, another perspective, just to compare the two, the later building, the later design, the earlier design. Just slightly broader, I think this is 22 feet across. You have to convert that into metric. And the other one I think was 20 feet across, each of the halves, each two sections. But what is different is the arrangement of the plan. It had 3 bedrooms. The finished building, when it was built, had only 2. Once again, these crisp little perspectives. The top one you've just seen in a larger version. The bottom one, the entrance coming in from the side. The carport is to the right, the living accommodations to the left. But there's also bedroom accommodation set behind the carport. These old drawings discolor. There's brown marks on them. Maybe this is due to glue. The drawings have been sometimes attached to boards. Maybe it's due to something having been attached to the drawing itself. In the case of these drawings, this could be an overlay that's put on the panelled walls to suggest a different material. The plan on the left is quite different to the plan I showed you a few minutes ago in terms of its function. This is a working drawing. This has dimensions. It tells you everything you need to know to construct the building from plan. You can set out the building. You know what the rooms are for. The doors are numbered. The windows have all the dimensions in there. You can understand how the building is made from this. This is what we refer to as a working drawing. There's a fireplace, a brick fireplace. You can see that in the top perspective. The house as built had no brick fireplace. And the fireplace forms one side of the entrance porch that you can see here, or the entrance way. So as you come in, there's a brick fireplace on your left. Here's a view from the inside looking out. One way of treating that brick fireplace, maybe treat it with bricks. But another way of treating it is to clad it in stone. Stone on the inside, brick on the outside. Does this look as good? I don't think so. It's also dishonest because it is a brick structure, so why clad it with stone? It's clearly not a stone fireplace. So as you look at these drawings, you can start to question them. What is the architect thinking? Why is he providing 2 almost identical perspectives, but with different materials? He's testing it, he's judging it, he's showing the drawings to the clients. Would you like it like this, or would you like it like that? In the end, they didn't like it at all. Well, they probably did like it, but it was too expensive. So there's the original Bailey house on the left. There's the redesigned Bailey house on the right. The brick fireplace, you can see, has gone. The house now is rationalized and reduced to something much more simple. I'm looking at the dimensions at the very bottom of the page. So this one here, I got them wrong earlier. This has 2 panels of 20-foot, 6-meter glazing. This one has 2 panels of 22 feet. That's 6.6 meter glazing. So it's slightly broader. But there are obvious changes elsewhere. The structural system, nevertheless, is the same. The spacing between the beams is the same. It is 10 feet or 3 meters. All these drawings are in imperial. They're all in feet and inches, so you're going to have to learn that. 10 feet is 3 meters. You can see the dimensions on the left-hand drawing. And this was the process, the idea of making a house of standardized parts by spacing all the columns the same distance apart, and therefore the beams. You created gaps between the columns that would take standard size panels. And if you were clever, you made these the spacings of the columns match the standard size of available panels, so you didn't have to cut or modify the panel. If a panel came 10 feet wide, then you spaced your columns 10 feet wide. You wouldn't space them 10 foot 6 inches wide. That would be a complete nonsense and very expensive. So both these buildings are set out on the same columnar grid. And the difference between them, of course, is that this one has lost, sorry, the earlier version has this bit up here: storage, laundry, and 3 bedrooms and a bathroom. And the later one doesn't have any of that. All it has is a storage box along one side of the carport. The later one is a much cheaper building. It has only 2 bedrooms, and they're placed within the main body of the building, as it were, and the all-purpose room has also vanished from the design. And there's the building as finished. You can see the regularity of the design in the top photograph. The 3 10-foot, 3-meter panels, absolutely regular. And then in the bottom picture as well. Another of his very crisp perspective drawings. Why would he draw a perspective drawing of the entrance? Because that's the way you go in. He's trying to sell you the idea. He's saying, look, that's your lead into the building. That's what you see. Oh, good, thank you. It's not much good drawing a perspective drawing of something else, unconsequential. You try to sell the idea with the perspective. And you can see through here that the carport is on the right. On the left, in the perspective, there's the sliding glass walls of the living room, and then beyond that, the second bedroom, outside which there's a little terrace and a tree which grows up through a hole in the roof. Look at the top photograph. The hole in the roof is still there, but the tree doesn't seem to be there. How much detail did he put into the design? There's endless sheets of detailed drawings in this archive. And what you can see here in the top 2 drawings on the left, I think, is an exquisite bit of draftsmanship as well as clever instruction. He's trying to get the builder to understand how to make the concrete foundation and how to place the steel column in that foundation. If you look at the photographs, you'll see there's water around 3 sides of the building. So how do you place a concrete foundation against the water and also support a steel beam at the same time. That is what you see in the left-hand drawing. The right-hand drawing shows a steel beam set into the solid ground, as it were, where there's no water, such as down the center of the house. So look at the left-hand drawing. You can see the slab coming in at the bottom of the drawing on the right, and how the slab gets much bigger at the end, which is standard. It has a sort of 45-degree slope, and then you get this larger block of slab, concrete, so the edge, the rim of the concrete slab is supported, and then to support the column itself, a separate foundation is needed, and this is set slightly underwater, and into that is positioned, or onto that is positioned, the H column. What are those two boxes at the top? These are the formwork. These are the concrete, the molds for the concrete. You know, this architect is designing the wooden mold to take the concrete. Everything is thought through to the smallest detail. And if you look carefully at those boxes at the top, you can actually see how the wood is formed at the corners, how one side overlaps another side. And when the concrete is poured and set, you take the boxes away. And this is, I think, an extraordinary level of detail. This is the sort of detail you need when you're making an automobile or something like that. Here we are making a house. In this country, most foundations are made by digging a trench in the ground, and then some bloke with dirty welly boots and builder's bum will throw cement into the trench and then start laying bricks on it. This is not that sort of house. This is a piece of craft work, and I think that's apparent in the perspective drawing. It's apparent through the detail in the construction drawings, and it's obvious in the photographs. So when you look at the archive material, you've got to investigate it, work out why it's drawn like that. What is he doing? Another perspective. This one is of the little courtyard space set between the two bathrooms, which are set between the bedrooms on one side, on the right, and the living dining area on the left. It's an open air space with a wall that has a fountain on it. On the plan, you can see that at the bottom, in the center of that sort of H-shaped arrangement, there's a little plant, and that plant is in this central courtyard space. There's a water feature and the fountain behind, and the fountain is intended to run down. It's a bar across the top of the mosaic wall, allowing water to run down, to trickle down into the water pool at the bottom. Okay, so he's designed it. It is 5 feet wide, 8 feet high. But it's more than just designed. He's marked out the feet, 300mm units across this one wall, because within that there are red mosaic tiles positioned. 8 of them. But he's given you a grid, so the mosaicist, the man who puts the tiles in, maybe a woman, can put the red mosaic tile in exactly the right place. This is a very high level of control. It's not like saying, well, go and stick some red tiles on that wall. No, you've got to get them in the right place, and you judge that by measuring it out really carefully. Oh, okay, so there's the place. I'd forgotten that I'd circled that. The archive tells you various things, not just about the architecture. It tells you about the man, about his life. Everything in there is personal to him. I don't think I found a wedding certificate. or divorce papers, but I found a lot of other stuff. As you will know from a previous lecture, you've seen this picture. He was on active service from 1944 to 1945. The war finished in the summer of 45, but he remained in the army nearly another year. He was with the 292nd Field Artillery Observation Battalion, and this map shows their route across Germany, from France into Germany. And the interesting bit is around on the left-hand side, where the arrow and circle are. This is where they seem to have their most action. He came across from New York to Southampton on HMS Carnarvon Castle. Here's a drawing he did in his diary or his notebook showing the ship, which was battered about. You can see the guns on the top. He can't spell Carnarvon, but that doesn't matter. Stormy seas, he said in the diary. They were being tracked by a U-boat, a German submarine. You can see that there in the picture. And when they got to Southampton, they went to a place called Swanage for a few days and eventually were shipped over to France. They arrived in Le Havre, where the town had been pretty much obliterated, and then they went east into Germany. And this map here shows the disposition of enemy troops in the last week of February 1945. This is his war. This is what he did. The bottom left, 3 purple or blue triangles. These are the positions of the observation posts. He was working in this artillery observation battalion, and I've explained this to you before, where they had to look for the flash of an enemy gun on a hillside perhaps, or in a field, and then take a bearing on that, as would the people in the other 2 observation battalion positions. Once they got 3 bearings, they could radio those into their gunnery command, who could then quickly find the coordinates, plot where the enemy gun was, and send a shell back to try to obliterate them. The town Saarbrücken is it was on the big blue map. They were working their way towards Saarbrücken. At the moment on this map, they're at Forsbach, and that's where the German guns were. So that's the last week of February 45, first week of March. So about a week later, things are changing. They've moved along a bit. This all explains his war. This all explains his background, what made the man. He's 20 years old, 21 years old. How many of you would be doing this? Can you imagine it? Well, the war came to an end, 1945, 5th of May. They were given leave. They could go to Paris. So here he is in Paris, Rue Sauvage, Savage Street. There's a drunken American soldier and some French lady coming out of the Coquette Cafe saying, "Baby." The American can't believe his luck. They go to and under the street light there's a couple of people kissing. Yes. They go to London next. This is Piccadilly Circus. There's yet another drunken American soldier, a London bus, a London taxi. The Eros sculpture in the middle of Piccadilly Circus was all boarded up, and hiding behind it are 3 tough girls from London, each armed with cudgels, bits of wood with nails in, and they're going to beat up this American soldier and steal his money and his cigarettes. This is London, 1945. These are all in his war diaries. He eventually left the army on the 1st of May 1946. These are his discharge papers. An honourable discharge. He is now a corporal. He's also an expert M1 rifle marksman, a grade he obtained in 1944. He's got a handful of medals, a chest full of medals. The American Campaign Medal, the Army of Occupation Medal, Good Conduct Medal, European, African, Middle Eastern Campaign Medal, and World War II Victory Medal. But these are all just general medals. You get these for just being there. He didn't win any Distinguished Service Orders or Purple Hearts or anything like that. But, you know, this is his life. This is what you have to understand about somebody. What was he going to do next? He comes out of the army. We don't know. So he needs an architectural education if he's going to be an architect. He goes to Pasadena City College, 1947 to 1948. He's taught how to draw the 5 architectural orders. He draws as a drawing exercise, a sort of modern building, probably a bit Art Deco. His instructor doesn't like it. He's marked on it, poor weight of line, keep pencil sharp. The education was hardly progressive. The Beaux-Arts, the traditional way of designing buildings using the classical orders, is clearly what the Pasadena City College is aiming for, and honestly that pencil drawing is pretty poor stuff. So he changes. He goes to the University of Southern California, and in his 3rd year he does a project on housing, wood, and the community. In California, one builds, or one did build then, with timber, only timber. You can't build in brick or stone because of earthquakes. Concrete wasn't really viable, and timber was the obvious answer. A lightweight timber frame, or even heavyweight, but a timber frame would allow you to build a structure that would resist earthquake movement. But there's also a social agenda here. Does a housing problem exist? And what is the best dwelling? These obviously are pages from his report. And he writes about structure. In order to produce a house that will serve the maximum types of people with the minimum of cost and effort, it will be necessary to turn to the efficiency of American mass production methods without sacrificing any human needs by paralysis of a static design. In order to do this, I think a modular system of parts should be established so as to dispense with expensive cutting on the job that costs time and wastes materials. While labor salaries are rising, the efficiency of the industry is also rising, which leads to the belief that the fabrication of parts at the factory is less expensive than the high-priced, rather awkward mode of fabricating on the site. Many times adjoining houses differ in structure only by a matter of an inch or two. This inch or two calls for the duplication of many unnecessary measurings and cuttings and exposes many chances for error. Yes, this all sounds terribly sensible and possibly terribly obvious. This is a 3rd-year architecture student. Do you think you could write something as insightful as that? Something that recognizes exactly what is needed, where the future is in house construction, the importance of the factory, the importance of modular construction. Could you do that based upon the knowledge you have as a 3rd-year student? Think about it. He continues, I found on the basis of observation of previous housing projects repetitive building principles that much time and money can be saved with the use of one slab and foundation form, usually made of steel, and identical plumbing pipes, all located in the same position and in the same relation to each other, bath plumbing stack adjacent to the kitchen plumbing stack. With this objective in mind, I have worked out a number of plans that revolve about a fixed foundation plan and plumbing setup. I found that this particular foundation plan can provide from 1 to 4 persons with maximum living standards, with only slight variations of the interior partitions, and in one case, case variation 4, the introduction of another element into the dwelling, garage. In all other cases, the garage is considered as a separate unit. And this is his plan. This is the idea, a basic foundation plan with the plumbing fixed and set, and then you can arrange it variation 3, variation 4, with a carport. Variation 4 says could be car here. Variation 3 has got 2 children's bedrooms and a sleep rest room. These plans, as they are drawn, are remarkably unsophisticated. They're crude. They show nothing of structure, but it's the principle that is really important. The way he's constructed or conceived this basic foundation plan, 1,248 square feet. Quick calculation will tell you what the dimensions are. How he's positioned the plumbing, which is the one thing you can't move, and arranged totally different living houses, living units around it. And he's building in timber, remember. This is all part of the same report, the same argument. Wood in relation to houses, a simple post and beam type. There's a perspective view, there's construction details. He has wooden boarding on the outside, he's got sheet material on the outside. You can see how the columns are attached to the beams and the beams attached to each other. They're not lap jointed, they're not cut in, they're actually held together with a metal plate in the bottom drawing of the bottom picture, so of the middle picture. What that tells you is that this is not timber construction, this is actually steel or concrete construction, because the post and the beam are not fixed together one into the other, one just sits on the other and then has to be strapped with a metal plate. So there's something wrong here. He's thinking, actually, he doesn't know it perhaps, of a different way of constructing. This is steel, or indeed this is concrete. Aerial perspective, the garage and the forecourt, and then all these different exterior zones. Places to play, places to sit, places to grow vegetables, places to dry your clothes. It's, I think, a rather wonderful little bit of autonomous living, and the house set in the middle of the site. And the man who was promoting this, his great teacher at the time, was a man called Calvin Straub. He looks like a mean bugger, doesn't he? Would you like him doing your crits? I think you'd prefer me. I haven't got a crew cut. And Calvin Straub was really the person behind what became known as the USC style. The architecture that came out of the school was like this. It was also known as the Pasadena style because architects in Pasadena, just north of Los Angeles, northern suburb, were building in this way. But it was this simple post and beam type. However, Pierre realized that this wasn't the right way to do things. And I think the clue is in that simple post and beam type drawing there. The way the beams sit on the columns and so on. The way to do it was in steel. So in his third year, he started building a steel house for himself. He did a project for a steel house, not a timber house, and his grades went from very good to very bad because he'd stepped out of line. He was doing the wrong thing. There he is up a ladder. George Foy, his friend, with a camera at the bottom. This is the inside of his house. Now you've seen many, many pictures of this sort of architecture. I understand that. This is the first time, the very first house he did for himself as a student, a fourth year student at university. Are you going to build a house next year? I don't think so. And he kits it out with all the right furniture, which he probably didn't own anyway, but it was brought in for the photo shoot. Exposed profiled steel roof, panelled walls in sheet material, glazed walls in sheet material, i.e. glass, all standard size components, very minimal, very crisp. And from this, he develops this idea of production houses. The Burbosch House, Tahunga, 1957. He graduated in 52? I can't remember now. This is, again, a familiar looking object. We've seen this stuff before. So why do I say production house? Because when it was published in Arts and Architecture magazine in February 57, I think it was February, it was published as a low-cost production house. And that means that this house, interesting as it might be, is just an example of what can be done when you do lots and lots and lots of these things. You keep the cost down and you mass produce the same elements. We've talked about this building, the west wall on the left, shaded the sun from the dwelling itself. Another early perspective drawing. Love the cars. The plan of the building. This is again a working drawing. Compare the working drawing with the perspective. Is it the same? Maybe, maybe not. Things change. These are the sort of questions you can ask yourself when you're investigating these buildings. The fireplace, of interest, I think, again, because a fireplace in a lightweight steel house is a source of heat. It absorbs heat from the fire in the daytime. It also, as you see in the bottom illustration, the concrete blockwork comes out into the outdoor air. It will absorb heat from the sun in the daytime, and at night time, this house, where the insulation is probably fairly minimal, this house can be warmed by residual heat emanating from that fireplace right in the middle of the building. And he knew how to design fireplaces, he knew how to design flues, make the smoke draw up. So there are these working drawings, these details that are always so accurate and well considered. And it's not just a sheet for the fireplace. The fireplace will be one of many things on a large sheet of drawings, all drawn in pencil, because that's how they work. And a view which can't be actually achieved because of the wall of the house, but a view through the west wall looking at the fireplace, and you can see how the fireplace sticks out into the sunlight on the south side of the building. And that's what it looks like. There's very little evidence in the archive of his interest in landscape, but here there is a piece of landscape design. I don't know if he did it, but if you look through the window there in the photograph, you can see a sort of Japanese garden. We'll come back to that. Meanwhile, let's just see how much detail there is in the making of this building. You've got the steel frame on the left of this drawing. You've got construction details for the steel frame in the corner there. All the sizes are given. You can see what is welded, what is bolted, and so on. And it is, this precision of detail that really leads to the highly precise product at the end of the process. Every junction, every detail is numbered. Look at the plan, all those numbers in little circles. That's a number that you can then relate to the drawings, the larger scale drawings, 5, 6, 7, 8 on the top right hand panel, for instance. You know exactly where this is on the roof plan. And you go inside the building, and it's got to be fitted out. It's got to have cupboards, it's got to have walls, it's got to have doors, and everything there is shown. How two bits of wood come together, two sheets of plywood come together at a corner, how a door frame is constructed, how a panel, a cupboard maybe touches or does not touch the ceiling. We've got the north wall, east wall, south wall, and I can't read what it says there, but other walls across the top. You know, the whole thing, as I keep on saying, is so carefully thought through that he leaves nothing to chance. And here's the garden with its little bit of Chinesery or Japanesery. That's the landscape drawing on the left, the full sheet, and the drawing on the right is the top corner of that landscape drawing, just taken off and enlarged so you can see it. You can see the house on the right, you can see the planting, the trees, and so on. And a couple of photographs of that area with a Buddha in it. I didn't see a Buddha on the plan, but you know, this is how it develops. And I'm also showing you, as well as the black and white pictures, these color slides, which he probably took himself, although the one on the left actually was taken by the LA Examiner, because it says so on the print. LA Examiner, that's a newspaper. So this is a photograph taken for publication. In the archive, one has endless color slide photographs. These are the hanging sheets that he used to file or store his pictures. Each 35mm color slide. These are celluloid pictures. They didn't have digital cameras in those days. They didn't have mobile phones. These are mounted in cardboard and stamped with his name. And there are also, of course, the black and white pictures that Shulman and others indeed took. The production houses in Saint-Jean, Quebec, in Canada. This is the idea of the production house. It could be made in the factory and produced in huge numbers. The pictures you see here are of a prototype, a real building that was erected using these standard sized panels that were designed for the use in the Arctic, use in very, very cold climates, highly insulated panels. And the site is large. I've never counted how many houses there are here. It must be getting on for 150 or something like that. There's a view down the street. This is his project. This is how you use production houses. You use them in quantity, use them in large numbers. And you can change them. They have different configurations, different plans, because within the same framework, as you saw back in his student work, you can then make a variety of solutions. The lower plan there shows the ground floor, the upper plan shows the upper floor. It's very straightforward, nothing particularly fancy about it. And then a elevation on the right showing again the use of panel construction. Whether it's glass or insulated panels, it's panel construction. And you can move into working drawings now, or the interiors, again, how they are set out. The exterior, how the panels are, which is glass, which is panel, what size they are. It's all set out on a grid that is lettered and numbered, A1 through to R7. And you know exactly where you are when you're putting that building together, because it's a kit of parts. But to get there, you have to resolve problems. So here's the sort of stuff you find also in the archive. Rough drawings, pencil drawings, comments on the right. Build stud frame in on edge for closets under landing. He's trying to get his rubber stamp to work. There are lots of numbers stamped there on both sides of the sheet. B, B, B. It's what you get in an architect's office. These are sheets of tracing paper. These are in the archive. They're stained with what? Coffee, maybe, glue, sweat, blood. I went to an exhibition at the RIBA once, and they showed a drawing done by somebody in Richard Rogers' office, and there was a brown stain on it and this was a drawing that was mounted under glass, and somebody had put a pencil circle around the blood stain and the brown stain and written the word blood. So you can sweat blood on drawings. And then there are drawings by other people. The Mayan construction company making the steel deck, making the steelwork that goes into the building. And then there are strange and interesting things. Here's a client, Manuel. He ran a Mexican restaurant, Manuel's Carnitas, on West Olympic Boulevard in Los Angeles. Pierre would go there for meals with his family. Gosh, you get quesadilla for $1.50. Manuel says he wants to build a holiday resort down in Tijuana in Mexico. This is his plan. This is Manuel's idea. You guys are in architecture school. You can draw a plan up to a certain level. Yes, you can draw elevations. Manuel couldn't. So we get these extraordinary drawings by Manuel, which I think are fascinating, that are plans and elevations somehow in the same drawing, overlapping with each other. Look at the right-hand drawing. It says Rio, which means river. And then you get elevations placed on the plan of the river. And similarly, his layout for the site, a semicircle with trees, with some big fountain in the middle, with the cabins, presumably, all those little components making up the big curve, and the Rio, the river at the bottom, part elevation, part plan. Maybe you should try your drawings like that. What would Joanna say? So Pierre rationalizes it. He makes it into a chevron shape, puts all the cabins together, all the same construction, all the same materials, all the same component sizes, and it's El Campo Turístico Manuel's tourist camp in Baja California, Lower California. This is production housing. This is what his architecture was about. And as you examine the drawings, you begin to realize that there wasn't pretty much a single building that couldn't be duplicated or replicated, because it was a kit of parts. And the biggest example, and the most adventurous, I suppose, of them, was the Chemehuevi housing project at Havasu Lake. Havasu Lake is a lake on the borders of Nevada, the state of Nevada, and the state of California. California is on the left of the plan, Nevada's on the right. This is in the desert, as you can tell from the picture, and this is where the Chemehuevi tribe, the Native American tribe, had their ancestral lands. And at the moment, they're living there in trailers, in caravans. So the idea was to build a housing development for them. And this was done through the School of Architecture at the University of Southern California, where Pierre Koenig was an instructor, working with students over about 4 or 5 years, each year developing the ideas with the next group of students who came through. They came up with this big project. And there was a lot of interaction with the local Native Americans. You can see a meeting there with cameras on the left. On the right it says Indian Campgrounds, Inc., Incorporated, Chemehuevi Reservation, a rather forlorn sign in the middle of the desert. And a brochure was produced describing the Chemehuevi future. I think it looks rather fanciful, all that lovely setting sun. And here's a house that they would build, something just like this one. This, of course, you will recognize as the house on Mandeville Canyon, built for Tom Seidel Associates. But it doesn't matter, because this is production housing. You take the house from here, you build it there, you adjust it. You maybe make the roof span longer, maybe put more insulation in, whatever the local conditions require. But you can make the same architecture that way. And the drawings that were produced were done by the students, probably the one at the bottom, and done by Pierre himself. the one at the top, signed Koenig. This is a house, an example of a house. There's, I won't say dozens, there probably is a dozen or 15, 20 variations on this theme. Houses with central courtyards, houses without central courtyards, houses with 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms, houses with garage, houses without garage, and so on. Does this look like something you've seen before? It looks in many ways like Case Study House 22. Solid walls, glazed at the end, some sort of central courtyard space. Maybe it's the first, not 22, 21, the Bailey House. Maybe it's the first version of that, rethought. And there's this wonderful drawing showing the variations. Here are 12 variations on the theme. Depending on the family requirements, you can get all these different configurations. This is production housing. This is housing as product, housing from the factory. But there were public buildings as well. There was the Chemehuevi Center, where they had their conference facilities, where there was an office. And I love this drawing because that slightly arch cowboy figure striding across the grass in boots and Stetson hat. Another rather thin version deep in the shadows beside the cars. Now the temperature in the desert here is hot, 40 degrees Celsius, not unknown, but it gets cold at night, so there's a huge temperature differential. And again, there's this problem of keeping the heat out and, in a sense, keeping the heat in at night. But what we don't see in these drawings, which you might have expected, is some concrete structure in the middle, a fireplace or something, to act as a heat sink. Where is the heat sink? How does the thermal heat get controlled? The thermal heat, the solar heat, there's heat from the sun. How does that get absorbed and controlled in this building? The answer is probably in the concrete floor. And if you look at the plan, you can see how the concrete floor comes out beyond the glazed area, and that will catch the sunlight, but the glazing is set back to not to protect you from the sunlight, but to keep you within the structure in a cooler part of the building. And the concrete slab would heat up in the day and radiate heat at night. But all that got built was this: the toilet block and a shelter block in the parking area. I think the perspective drawing there of the toilet block is a student drawing. The construction drawing most probably is as well. It's got a label on saying University of Southern California School of Architecture, July 73. July 73. The Chemehuevi Project 3. So this is the 3rd year of the project. Yes, the toilet block did get built, but interestingly, not quite like in the perspective drawing. They put modesty screens around the entrances, which aren't shown on the plan either. Difference between plan, perspective, and then the finished object. Something worth commenting on. And then the bottom picture shows this structure. A student drawing, I'm sure, on the right, the real thing on the left, so they can get out of the heat. Eat their quesadillas and tacos and so on. All this stuff, I keep repeating this, but all this stuff, all this material is there in the archive, student work as well. How did he operate? How did he deal with the students? So we come back to this house, which we've just seen as the model for the Chemehuevi Indians. Built as a production house, built for speculation, built to be sold. This is how it appears in elevation or perspective actually, but you can't see it like this because the road is down below and there's masses of planting. But it's a building which has got 3 parts. I've introduced you to this before. The living part on the left, then a courtyard, the sleeping part in the middle, then a courtyard, and the car part on the right. And it's all under a continuous roof. and it's all glazed or panelled, and it's all modular, and it's all factory made. And this is before the first alterations were made. When it was sold, the first client asked Pierre to move the wall of the kitchen out to the end of the overhang of the roof. So the wall of the kitchen was moved out. Was that a good idea? Probably not. It gave them more space, but the idea of the overhang is that you shade the kitchen from too much sunlight. Move the wall out to the end, the heat will get in because there's no shade. And the living room on the left. There's a great variety of stuff here. I came across these aerial photographs. I think the first thing I found was the sales document from the company that flew around Los Angeles photographing your house. Do you want your house photographed? Yes, please. So Pierre has his own house photographed. Koenig House number 2. What's that black dot above the red circle? A hole had been punched through the photograph, presumably for filing it. I put the photograph on a rubber pad, which is what you have to put things on in that archive. Therefore, the rubber pad shows through the hole. I could have put a bit of paper there, but I don't think I noticed it at the time. There's his house built in 1985. This was probably done 15 years later, about 2000, and you can see already the I hesitate to say decay, but the residue gathering on the flat roof of the house. When the house was sold after he and his wife died, it was sold about 2010, and it was re-roofed. So 25 years is about as long as you can get a roof like that to last. And this idea of production housing, whether it's a one-off or whether it's for 100 examples, it's the same way of thinking. It's an architecture of components, an architecture of parts, an architecture based upon modules. And you can recognize that in this one building, the way it stacks up. Each part is just an accumulation of elements which are the same as the previous parts, bigger and higher. Cross section through it in the middle, elevation at the top, internal elevation at the bottom, and then down the side a series of other elevations. And the famous $10,000 drawing. Look at the bottom right hand panel, and the last bit of steel is going in, and the building has a sort of L-shaped section at the front. We'll come to that. It's the workshop and studio area. But in the archive there, to support all those drawings, there are small detailed drawings such as the solar roof here that he designed. You know, it's for this building because it says under the job in the panel at the bottom, it says Koenig 1983. He's designing his own solar panel roof. And there's hundreds of documents. This is a receipt. I think it's the receipt from Brace Engineering for $17,127 for the steel frame in place, on site, 50% of the contract, less the material cost. So this tells you how much it cost. It tells you when it was done. It tells you that it was done in 2 parts and so on. And then there's all the construction reports and the structural calculations, such as this one by Dmitry Vergun that you can see here, February 1982, for the same house. So we've got at least a 3-year design period from the construction report to the completion, if not longer. And there's the L-shaped bit of the house I was referring to that you saw in that construction, 12-stage construction drawing. This is his office, this is his studio, this is his workshop, if you like, and a view of the inside there. And on the wall at the end, what do you see? You see Case Study House 21, big photographs. He did timber houses. It wasn't just steel. he'd been brought up doing timber. He built timber in the manner of University of Southern California. He couldn't do steel on the beach, he had to do timber. It's the same way of thinking. It's repetitive, it is simple, it is straightforward. The Holland House in Los Angeles, based, I would argue, on the USC, the school design he did. Look at the drawing at the bottom. You've seen that drawing before. It's the same building, but we'll have a more sophisticated junction between the timber posts and beams. A couple of houses that show the variety of forms that one can do with timber. You can do them with steel, but maybe he just felt timber was more appropriate for this small-scale work. And you get these construction drawings, such as the one on the right, which can be used for almost any number of timber houses. They're standard details. The Henbest house, set round a courtyard with a sawtooth roof elevation. Or the Colbus house, set on a hill, stepping down with a series of pitched roofs. And finally, the most curious of them, the Burton house, known as sometimes as the Burton pole house, because it's supported on big poles, those long bits of timber. The idea was to construct a framework, and then the client would come along and fill it out in 4 stages. So the framework was built on the hillside, very steep hillside, and built of massive bits of timber bolted through. It's a different house to the steel houses, but then if you look at the elevations, you can see again it's modular, it's panelled, it has all those qualities to it. And there's Pierre and Dog on site as this building developed. And on the right, Pierre once again, now with Julius Schulman, the photographer, which comes back to that photograph. Yes, that photograph. There's Julius holding up the photograph. They're sitting in the kitchen at Case Study House 21. So the question is, it's a chicken and egg question. Which came first? Why is the house famous? Is it famous because of the photograph or because of what it is? And I was talking to Pierre's son, who was telling me that at some exhibition opening, his father and Julius Schulman were almost hitting each other, almost trading blows. They got so angry with each other. Julius was saying, if it wasn't for me, your house wouldn't be famous. And Pierre was saying, well, if it wasn't for my house, you wouldn't have your photograph. So who is responsible? Go right back to the beginning of this lecture. What is the thing about the house? Is it the picture or is it the building? Have a think about that. Okay, seminars. I'll see you next week if you're in the group. If you're not, you've had one seminar with Nick Ray. I hope you find that satisfying. Indeed, I hope you will find my one satisfying. You've got a test in January on pictures from all these lectures. You've got to write an essay based upon the seminars. And what can I say? I hope you found these lectures informative. Thank you.